Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and in this video I'm going to show you how can we integrate SQLite database with EF Core Entity Framework Core in a .NET MAUI application. Okay, so for SQLite we can integrate it without using EF Core as well. For that I already have a video on my channel, that is a two-part video actually. So I'm going to drop the link of those videos in my description box. If you guys want to check out, you can check those videos out. In that we have integrated SQLite with some basic code operations without EF Core, raw SQLite directly. And in this current video, I am going to show you how to use Entity Framework Core with SQLite with .NET MAUI. Okay, so it's a bit different for this. So we'll see how can we do this. So let's quickly create a project. So it will work for both .NET MAUI app and .NET MAUI Blazor hybrid app, because both of these are using .NET MAUI. So it will be same. Next, I'm using MAUI EF Core SQLite. This is the name of the project. Let's quickly create it. .NET 8, yes. So for this, we have some caveats for using EF Core SQLite in .NET MAUI applications. It is straightforward, easy with ASP.NET Core applications for direct web APIs, minimal API, MVC, Razor pages, or Blazor applications, because all those are hosted under ASP.NET Core. So EF Core is fully supported with ASP.NET Core. Alright, so for this thing, first we need to add NuGet packages. So we'll simply go to manage NuGet packages, and the NuGet packages which we need, those are we will need two NuGet packages actually. So first one, we'll use Microsoft.Entity Framework Core .SQLite. First we need this package. What happened? Entity Framework Core.SQLite. Yes, what is the, oh, I need to go to browse, and we are here. So Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQLite.core. So pay attention, we need SQLite, not SQLite.core. This is the bare-bone package which has the the base of SQLite core, but with this Microsoft Entity Framework Core.SQLite, it has all the additional stuff which is required to run a SQLite database with EF Core. Okay, in we could say .NET MAUI or mobile applications as well. So this is the perfect package. So Microsoft Entity Framework Core.SQLite, I'm going to install it, and in this application we are going to use code first approach, so that we'll add migrations, code first migrations. We'll apply those migrations. So for running the migrations using EF Core, we need one more package, and that package is going to be Entity Framework Core.tools. .tools. So Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.tools. Let's install it. It gives us all these commands so that we can run these and we can generate a migration. Apply, accept, and we are good. This is also got installed. Now when we work with the EF Core, we need two things. First, we need entities. Second, we need DB context. Okay, so for this, what we'll do, we'll simply create a new folder in this project. So I'm going to create a new folder. Let's call it data. Okay, and inside this data folder, I'm going to create one more folder for our entities. All right, now inside this entities, let's quickly create an entity. So here we'll say, let's say user.cs. We'll have a simple user class, and inside this we'll say we'll have two properties, the basic properties, public and id. I hope you can see this. Zoom 135, yeah, you should be able to see it. Then I'll use one more property, let's say public string name. Okay, and this ID, this is going to be a key. So if you follow me, you guys would know that I love data annotations. So I mostly use data annotations only, but you are free to use the Fluent API as well if you want to. And we'll have the explicit table attribute on this class defining the table name. So this is user, or you can use simply name of user if you want to. Let's make it public class user, and we are good. Our entity is ready. Now let's create a data context, DB context. So inside this data folder, I'm going to create one more class, and this I'm going to call it data context. The name is up to you. You can name it whatever you want. I'm using this data context, public data context, and for DB context with entity framework core, we need to inherit this from DB context, which comes from Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. Alright. Now we will have this constructor where we are going to have DB context options with data context. Okay, here we'll have our options, and from this we'll call our base class with options. So in this video, what I'm going to do with you, we will do something, we'll get an error, we'll fix that error. So there are, as I already mentioned, with using EF core, with SQLite in .NET MAUI application, there are some caveats, there are some problems. So I am going to show you all the errors and the solution for all those errors. But when you will create the project, you will already know that what you should do beforehand, so you won't get any error. Okay. All right. So we have this ready. Next thing, we need to add our entity to our DB context. So we'll simply have a DB set property here, and the entity name is user, which comes from our entities. So user, and we have users. All right. Now we have our data context ready. Now we need to add this data context to our DI. So we'll go to our MAUI program.cs, and here we'll say builder.services.add DB context, okay, of type data context. And most of the time what we have been doing inside this, we will take options, and on this options we'll use SQLite because we are using SQLite, and then we need to provide the connection string for this. So basic connection string is data source equals database name for our SQLite database. So let's say maui.db. All right. So our registration is done. Now next thing is we need to generate migrations for this. Okay. Now our entity ready, our registration is ready, everything seems fine. Now next thing, we'll generate migration so that it creates the database and it creates this table. In our case, this user table. All right. So for this, we will open package manager console. We'll use database migrations, or you can go to tools, NuGet package manager console. Okay. Now we'll start getting errors. So for adding the migration, we'll say add migration. Then we need to provide migration name. So in our case, we can use initial migration. So this name is up to you. You can name it whatever you want. It's totally up to you. Okay. So I'll say add migration, initial migration. Now by default, it will going to create a folder on our root named migrations, and it will add those migration classes inside that folder. But that is not what I want in this particular case. I want all the database migration related stuff in my data folder. Okay. So for this, after this, we can add a flag -o, and here O means output directory. So here we will explicitly define that where I want our migration, my migrations. So here we'll say data/migrations. So add migration, that means create a migration with this name, and output directory is going to be this. So save those migrations inside this data/migrations folder, migrations. Let's press enter and let's see if it works. So it is going to take some time for the first time. Now we got our first error. So it says startup project MAUI App core SQLite targets platform Android. The entity framework core package manager console tools don't support this platform. Okay, so because we just created our project using .NET MAUI, so it is right now supporting all the 5 supported platforms: Android, iOS, Mac OS, Windows and Tizen. So Android does not support the code first migrations. So what we'll do, we know that Windows supports it. So what we'll do, we'll simply come here in a csproj file and we will comment out all the target frameworks: Android, iOS, Mac Catalyst, and we'll just have Windows. So this is just for generating the initial migrations. We will uncomment this line. It will work on all these platforms, but we need it for the first time when we are creating the migrations. Okay, that is just for the development purpose, we could say. It does not have to do anything on build time, runtime. So I'm going to simply comment the first line where we have target frameworks .NET 8, Android, iOS, Mac Catalyst. Second line is Windows, so which we have, which we will run. Now let's see if it works this time. So I'm going to follow the same thing: add migration, initial migration, -o, data/migrations. I have comment out all other platforms. This time build succeeded. And then again we got this issue. And now this issue says unable to create a DB context of type this blank, the exception, unable to resolve service for type Microsoft Entity Framework Code DB context options. Okay, so it is not able to resolve DB context options. And where this DB context options is, if we go to our data context, we are using this constructor with this DB context options with data context. So for MAUI projects, this does not work. It works with all other approaches. Maybe ASP.NET Core it works always because we have been following this thing only. So for this, what we are going to do, we'll simply remove this and we'll use the default constructor. Now it helps us to, for the mostly web applications where the DB context options are getting cached and those can be reused for multiple runs. But for this thing with SQLite, we are good. This is going to run on single device at a time, single instance. So we are good. So I simply removed that. Let's try to run the migration again. We'll see if it works this time. Build started, build succeeded, and again we have some error. And this time this error says unable to create DB context of type blank, the exception, the type initializer for module threw an exception. Okay, now here it says for this particular error, I try to figure out what the solution could be, why this is happening. I could not find anything. Then I went to the internet, I tried to search a lot of things. So I found a GitHub issue for this. So for .NET MAUI application, somehow it is not able to generate the core first migrations directly. Someone found out one workaround for this. So I'm going to show you guys that workaround. So I have one link. This is the issue. If we go and check .NET 8 migration on Blazor Hybrid app, so it is same for Blazor Hybrid and .NET MAUI directly. So unable to create DB context of type this, exception, the type initializer for module threw an exception. So this is the same error. So those guys tried to find some solution, but someone found a solution. So that is not direct solution, but there is a workaround. So this is the workaround. Okay, I found workaround and I'm going to be upfront and honest. I found this by luck and have no clue what it is doing and or why it works. I added this to the csproj and then it added to the migration. It started working. So we need to add this thing. Let me zoom it. I will drop this link in the description box and I'll add this line also if you want to check it out. If you want to copy this and directly add it to your project. So it is Windows App SDK Deployment Manager Initialize. We need to set it false in our csproj file and then it will work. So let's copy it. Let's go to our project, our csproj, and we can add it inside this property group anywhere. Let's add it here. So I have added it, Windows App SDK Deployment Manager initialize false. I'll paste this line in the description box. You can copy it from here, and I'll add the GitHub issue link as well. Alright, so save everything. Now let's try to run it again. Add migration, initial migration -o data migration. Build started, build succeed, and now we again got some error. Let's see what this is. Unable to create a DB context of type blank. The exception, no database provider has been configured for this DB context. But if we check, we have provided it. So if we go to our MAUI program, we have already provided this use SQLite with this thing. Okay. So it is saying a provider can be configured by overriding the DB context on configuring method or by using add DB context on the application service provider. Okay. Now, if add DB context is used, then also ensure that your DB context type accepts a DB context options object in its constructor. Now, if you remember, we simply removed that DB context options from our data context constructor because that is not working with this, with EF core, with .NET MAUI application. So we removed that. So what that caused, that simply made it null. So that means it is not going to use this thing. So we need to have some different workaround for this, and that workaround is we can do not workaround. We have two options by which we can add the configuration to our data context. One is directly adding here, and second is we can override a method in this data context that is on configuring. So we are going to use that method. We'll go to MAUI program. We'll simply, let's say, we'll copy this connection string. We'll remove this thing. Here we will just have builder.services.addDB context data context. That's all. And then we'll go to our data context class. Here we will override a method. That method is going to be override on configuring. Inside this we'll say options builder dot, here we can use SQLite and then our connection string, which is data source maui.db. Save everything. Now we are good. Let's try to run the migration again. Build started. Build succeeded, and boom, we are good. Okay, it created this migration for us. Alright, create table users with these two columns with primary key and everything is fine. And it added these to our data folder. Inside that it created migrations folder, and here are our migrations. Alright, so this is all the setup we need beforehand for this. So all these errors, we fixed all these. Now we have our migration ready. Now we need to run this migration, right? So that it creates the database and it creates this table which we need. So for this, what we can do, we can simply go to our main starting point of our application. And in our case, that is app.xaml.cs. This is the main starting point. So here, what we will do, we can simply inject our data context here. Okay. And then what we can do, maybe directly here inside this on initialized, or maybe here we can simply override a method that is going to be on start. And here what we can do, we can say underscore context dot database dot migrate. So what it is going to do, it is simply going to apply any pending migration for the context database, and it will create database if does not already exist. Okay, so first it will create a database, then it will apply migration, and if we already have applied all the migrations, there is no migration to apply. then it will simply skip it, we could say. So now we are good. Now it will create the table. Alright, so that was all the setup what we need. Now let's try to insert some data into this database, and let's try to fetch it so that we can see that things are working. So let's do this. Let's do that here only. In on start, what I'll do, I'll simply have a method here. So private void, we could have it asynchronous as well if we want, but let's have it like this only. So private void, let's say seed database. I'm having it like this. All right, so here I'll create one user. So var user equals new user from our entities, and name equals Abhay Prince. I'm adding my name here. All right, then I'm saying context.users.add this user, and after that I'll say context.save changes. Context.save changes, so to save this user in the database. Now our database is ready. Now let's call this seed database method from on start, and it should be after the migration. So this is not the right place, or this is not the right way to do this. We might have to have some let's say some logic here to check if we already have migrated database, we already have this data in this. So here we might do this: if underscore context dot let's say users dot any, if we have any user already, then we'll simply return from here. So what it will do, it will simply check. So it will say we already seeded the database. Okay, so now we will check if we already have users in the database, then we know this thing is already run, because this will be run on all the app launches. Whenever we'll start the app, then it will be getting called, it will be getting executed. But we don't need this on again and again. We need this user only once. All right, so save everything. Now we are good. This user will be inserted in the database. Now we need to fetch this user. For this, what we will do, let's go to our main page only. So main page.xaml.cs. Here what we'll do, let's inject our data context. Ideally, maybe in most of the cases you would be using view models. So maybe you can use those view model, you can inject data context there, or maybe you can create a service class and you can inject data context there. So it's up to you. I'm just simply showing you if we are able to get the data from the SQLite database or not. So that's why I'm doing it here. So context, and I think we are good. So do we need this? We'll see. And on this main page.xaml, let's say I'm going to have one label with, let's set some name. So x name, let's say name lbl, name label. Okay, and here I'm going to have a default text. We'll say user name from database, something like this. This is the default. Okay, and let's say font size, we'll have 25, and we are good. Now we can use this name label here inside our, maybe let's do this insert constructor only, or maybe we can override a method here, override on appearing. Here what we'll do, we have this context, so we'll get this user, we'll say user equals underscore context. I'm using all the synchronous versions of this. You can use asynchronous versions as well, there's no problem with that. Let's do this if you want. So private override async void on appearing. So var user equals context.users.first.default async, and we'll add a wait here. So this is giving error because we need using entity framework core, and we are good. Now we have this user. We'll quickly check. So if user is not null, then what we'll do, we'll simply access the name label, which is this name lbl. Okay, so we'll say name lbl, dot text equals this username, or maybe we can have the same structure, this. So here we'll say username from database, this user dot name. And now I'm going to run this application. We should see this username Abhay Prince here on this name label. All right. Now there is one problem. We have added this data context in main page. So this main page is not getting registered in our DI. We are actually creating, no, this is no, from where is it? Oh, this is coming from DI. In app, we are using app shell. Okay, we are good. Now main page, because we added that main page, that data context construct to the constructor of main page, we need to register that. So here we'll say builder dot services dot add singleton main page. All right, now let's try to run it. Now I'm running it. It is going to take some time for the first time. It will do all that stuff. It will build it for the first time, then it will apply the migration, create the database, all that stuff. Now we have this error, Microsoft Data SQLite exception, no such table users. It is not able to create the user. That is because on appearing, maybe this is executing before on start. We can check it, or if we run it second time, we will not be seeing this. On start, migrate, see database. If we add a breakpoint here, let's continue. After that, it came to this on start. So it will migrate the database this time. So what we could have done, maybe instead of having it here, we could have directly have it inside this app. Before this app shell registration, we could have done this. Okay, so this should have done. This should have do the trick, so it will work. Yeah, let's do this. Let's remove this thing from on start. Save it. Let's try to run it. It should work this time, and we should see the name. And we again got some error, underscore context object reference not set to an instance of an object. That's because we are using this before and we are setting underscore context later. Let's move it up. All right, save it to try. We have our breakpoint. Let's remove this breakpoint, continue, and we can see username from database Abhay Prince. So this works. That means saving into the database worked, fetching from the database works. So this is how we can implement SQLite database with entity framework core in .NET MAUI application. But right now we are running it on Windows. Let's try to check it on Android if it is working there. So for that, first thing we need to go to our csproj. Now we don't need this Windows app SDK deployment initialize, so we can simply comment this out. This was needed just to generate the migrations. And then let's uncomment this target frameworks, because now we want to target it for all the platforms. So save it. Let's unload and reload the project because we changed the target framework. So maybe you can close the Visual Studio and open it again. I'm going to unload it, save everything, then reload this project with all the dependencies. We are good. Now we will try to run it on Android. So Android emulator, I'm selecting it. Let's run it on Android emulator. So here also it is going to take some time for the first time because it will start the emulator, it will try to build the Android build and then all that stuff. So for the first time it will take some time. It started building. So app is starting up and we have one error. So it says Microsoft.data.sqlite.sqlite exception SQLite error 14 unable to open database file. Okay. So the problem here is it will be same for iOS and Mac OS as well. So the problem here is by default what connection string we have used. If we go to our data and data context.cs, here we have direct data source maui.db which will create it on root, we could say. So for Windows we are implementing it on Windows OS, Windows application using Visual Studio. So all the support is there, so it is able to figure out where it should create. But for other platforms, for Android, iOS, Mac OS, it is not able to directly figure out this. We need to provide the complete path, okay, from MAUI side. So the complete path we can simply do, we'll say var db path equals, here we have file system which comes from .NET MAUI. Here we have app data directory. Okay, so this is the main directory path. We need to get this, we need to have this database inside this folder. So for this we'll simply say db path, we'll say path.combine to merge this folder and the database name, and the database name is what it is, maui.db. all right. And now with this use SQLite, what we can do, maybe let's use for this one, we have one more approach, and that is going to be file name equals this complete path db path. Okay, so we'll make it dynamic, we'll say this. So first we are getting path db path using this file system.app data directory. This is going to work for all the platforms, Android, iOS, Mac OS, Windows. All right, so we are getting this app data directory and we are combining this path with database name. We have db path which is direct database name, and then we can use SQLite with this. Yeah, and one more thing, this db, db3, all these are valid SQLite extensions, so you could use db or db3, this will work. All right, so save it. Now let's try to run it on this Android device. Okay, it's coming. And boom, we have username from database Abhay Prince. So on Android it is work. It is able to set the database, set the value, insert the value in the database and fetch that value from the database. Okay, so it worked on Android. With this change, let's try if it's still working on Windows or did it break something. So I'm again selecting the Windows machine. Let's try to run it and we'll see. App is coming and we have this running here as well. All right, so this will work, behave same, and the process will be same for .NET MAUI Blazor hybrid application as well. All right, so this is how we can integrate SQLite with Entity Framework Core in .NET MAUI application. So you saw it is a bit different for .NET MAUI applications than with the ASP.NET Core applications. So I'll quickly give a recap what all we have done. So first thing, we have installed two packages. Those were Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore.SQLite and Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore.Tools. Please pay attention on this. When we search for this in the NuGet package manager, it gives one more package, that is SQLite.core. That is kind of incomplete package for our use case. So once I got a lot of time, I got so many problems with this, I have accidentally used that core package and it was not working. All right, so we need to install these two packages, SQLite and tools. After that, what we have done, we have simply created an entity, which is this entity. Then we created a data context, okay, which should be a subclass of db context. And then Ideally we should have that db context options for all other approach whenever we work with EF core, but for .NET MAUI EF core it does not work, this db context option, so we will not have it here. Instead what we'll do in data context, we'll override on configuring and we'll get the db path using this path.combine file system app data directory maudb, and then we'll say options builder use SQLite, and here we'll say file name equals to this db path. Then we will register this data context in our MAUI program.cs. So here we have registered this add db context. Pay attention, we are not using that options.use SQLite here. That's because we cannot have db context options as a constructor parameter in data context for .NET MAUI application, so that is not going to work. That's why we have simple registration here, and we are setting the connection string in this on configuring here only. Now after that we have tried to generate the migration. For migrations, Android and other platform does not support database code first migration. So what we had done, we went to the our csproj, we simply comment out all the target frameworks. We had only Windows enabled because we know on Windows this the database code first migrations will work, so that's why we commented these out. And after that when we run, so it somehow not able to it was giving an exception. So for that we have some GitHub issue where this error is there, but there was no direct solution from anyone, but one person found out a workaround. That is, we need to add this Windows App SDK deployment manager initialize this tag to our csproj file. What it is doing, this person does not know, I don't know, so we just need to add it. So I added it here in the property group of our csproj. I added it here, and after that I again went to our package manager console and I simply add a migration. So add migration, whatever name, and this time it worked. So it generated the migrations. Then next step was to apply or run those migrations so that the database is created and our table got created. For this, what I have done, I have went to the app.xaml.cs file. Here I have injected the data context in app, and here I have simply called this context.database.migrate, which will create the database, and then it will run apply any migration which is pending migration is there. So it created the database, created the table. Then this seed database, this part is totally up to you or your requirements. For this particular demo, this sample, I had to show you something. I was not adding any form to insert the data, so I had this data beforehand. That's why I created this seed database function, this method here. So here first thing, I am just checking if we already have any user, that means we already applied this seed database logic. So we'll simply returning it from here. If we have not, that means this is the first time database is generated, table is generated, we are adding the first record. So for this I created this user entities object, context.users.add, and then save changes. Now we have this user in the database. Now we can use this database using this db context. We can inject it anywhere in our application, and we can simply query the users collection on this database context the way we used to do it with entity framework. So this is related to entity framework. So that's all the setup we need for implementing adding SQLite database with entity framework core in a .NET MAUI application. All right, so after adding those the running migrations, we can simply come and uncomment the target frameworks, and we can comment out this thing Windows App SDK deployment. We can remove this because this was just to apply generating the migrations. Alright, so that's all for this video. And if you guys don't want to do all this stuff and you don't want to use EF core with SQLite in .NET MAUI, so I already have those videos where I'm not using EF core, I'm using raw SQLite. So I'm going to drop the link in the description box. So if you want to, you can check those videos out, so you will get a better understanding how all these things are working. Alright, that's all for this video. Please like this video, share this video, subscribe my channel. I'll be back soon with some other cool video. Till then, bye bye, happy coding.